Welcome to the Work the System podcast, where we help entrepreneurs make more and work less by managing their systems. And I'm your host, Josh Fonger. Today, we have a special guest. We have Matt McFedries. Matt is the co-founder and CEO of Debtor, an on-demand, scalable accounts receivable software that revolutionizes business accounting. With a background in digital content management and web development, Matt now focuses his energy on growing and managing his tech business across Australia, New Zealand, the UK, USA, and beyond. All right, Matt, why don't you give us the backstory and tell us how you became the CEO of Debtor?
Sure. Well, great to be on this podcast and having a chat about this. It's probably an accident that I ended up running a business in the area of accounts receivable. It's certainly a good conversation killer when people ask what I do. They're like, accounts receivable, debtors, and they're like, okay, what else you got? But it's a very painful problem, and I experienced it myself in my web design business that I started back in 2009. And I love building websites. I love talking to customers, but I didn't like anything admin related. I was pretty much allergic to bookkeeping and therefore following up my unpaid invoices. And I think, like a lot of business owners, I assumed people would pay one day. And then I guess when I've got invoices that hadn't been paid for, say, 6 months or more, and I needed the cash, so I started looking a bit more closely at that part of the business, and I still wasn't great at it, like picking up the phone, trying to put a system in place, or I had nothing in place. It was just me, some overdue invoices and a telephone, and no desire to pick it up. So what I ended up doing, sadly or crazily, was borrowing more money. My internet banking, I could log in, it had a slider that I could drag out and just borrow more money. And I took that all the way out to the maximum, which is about 30K. And I ended up paying about $600 a month in interest. And that was my my penalty for really not having a process and not having thought about how I was going to manage late payment. Because often when you start a business, you don't really think about that, right? Everyone's going to pay. I'm going to do great work. We all live happily and make money. So I think the catalyst, though, to actually start the business was a conversation with my accountant who was complaining of the same problem. And I'm kind of like a problem solving type kind of guy. And we started to solve it, built some software, and here we are 5 years or more down the track and helping thousands of businesses, get it right.
It sounds like a great solution to a problem that I know a lot of entrepreneurs have, because who likes doing collection calls or trying to track down money? So tell us how the software works quickly. Like what does it actually do?
Sure. So I guess the software that does the automation piece. So our process when we talk to any customer is, first up, we ask them, what is your current process? Well, step me through your process when somebody doesn't pay on time. And usually there's an awkward silence, and they go, well, there's not really a process. There's no rules around at 14 days past due, we do this, at 30 days, we do this. And so really the first thing we do is we've got a wee worksheet we can give people, and we discuss, how do you want to communicate with your customers as things become more overdue? And the trick here is actually to see it as customer service. It's not, and this is maybe the mind hack that, if you can take that away today, think about this as customer service, right? And this makes it a whole lot easier. And it's actually one of the foundations on which we built my business, Debtor, because we have people that can pick up the phone. But the reason we can pick up the phone a whole lot sooner, even at 7 days, 14 days past due, is because it's a customer service call. And that's when we can say, you're just trying to get to the bottom of what's gone wrong. Have they got the invoice? Was the amount correct? All these kind of details. So I'm kind of, diverging from your question, but I guess once we step through those customer service touch points, so every interaction, whether it's an email or a phone call, is a customer service touch point. designed to get that relationship back on track. When the relationship's back on track, then the cash can normally flow.
So why don't you tell us the common mistakes that people make? Because there's got to be some common things that they have in their own system before they talk to you that you look at and you're like, wow, you really shouldn't be doing it that way. So what are some common ones?
Yeah, sure. So in an ideal world, I think Debtor Daddy is the ambulance at the bottom of a cliff in a way where we're mopping up things gone wrong.
Mm-hmm.
We're doing more to build the fence at the top of the cliff. That's where you should be thinking about things. And that actually starts from your quote. So being very clear about what's included in what you're going to deliver, being very clear about when you expect to be paid and what methods of payment. So it's being very upfront and specific. Some businesses I've seen actually have a separate document they get their customers to sign around payment. It's like, yes, we agreed to pay you in 7 days by this method. And so they make it very, very explicit. I think the other mistake is probably related to not seeing it as that customer service experience, and that people put off the call because they think it's going to be awkward. And so the key thing is to start that process a whole lot sooner, whether it's a friendly email reminder, whether it is that phone call, but having that plan and sticking to it is probably the key thing to get in place.
What is it about? Are people afraid to be that clear because they're afraid they're going to lose the deal? They're afraid they're going to lose the client, and they'd rather just say, "Yeah, we're working to work together," and you said yes, and I said yes. So we'll just get started. Is it that they're afraid to actually show the dollar amount, show the terms, show the ways to get paid? Is that why they don't do it?
Yeah, I think so. And often they are in the terms, buried in the terms of business and
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily upfront. Like what we changed in our quoting process, actually, because you can use some really cool online quoting tools that automate your quotes. We just change it to make sure that the payment terms are in those first few bullet points right up front. And so being more confident about putting that forward. And in my experience, I can totally get the fear of sort of saying, and we expect to be paid, because it's all cool when you win the deal and everyone's happy. And then there's kind of like that moment where it's like, and so you're going to pay me this, on these terms. It does sort of change it subtly, but usually that comes across as being more professional when you're upfront about it. Because it's just good business. And I think your customers will appreciate and respect the fact that you have a solid process and communication and expectations around getting paid. And I guess, once you've done that a few times, you start to understand that that's just good business and people will respect it.
So tell me what is it probably depends on the industry and maybe even the country and regulations, but what is the standard protocol between emails, phone calls, text messages, knocks on the door, or letters? What is a normal process? So let's just say that I have, I'll say I'm a dental office and somebody gets a ton of work done and they want a payment plan and they're paying cash instead of insurance. And let's just say it's a $6,000 massive mouth overhaul, and they made their first $1,000 payment, and they're going to make the $1,000 payment a month, and the second month it doesn't come in. What should happen?
Yeah, there's no hard and fast rules.
Okay.
I would always say get onto it sooner than later, because it actually reflects on your business and your professionalism. So following up very, very quickly every single time will show the customer that there is no wriggle room.
Mm-hmm.
Customers are very good at finding any slack in the system, or humans in general will find out what rules are actually rules and what are very bendable. So ideally, you want to start with an automated reminder that goes out. Give enough time for reconciling your bank and watching for that payment to come in. So maybe 7 days past due, have the automated reminder go out. But then don't wait too long, send out another automated reminder, but then pick up the phone. Like, it should be very, very quick, because the way to phrase it would be like, well, this is a surprise. You haven't paid. Like it's, we agreed. So what's going on that means you haven't paid? And that's what we're trying to get to get to the bottom of it. So the sooner the better. And if you go in with the customer service mindset of resolving this very unexpected, you didn't pay me issue, right? Then you can start to get that resolution sooner. And often it's, your customers are busy. They've probably got the same challenges that you do, especially if you're selling to small businesses. They're time poor. Their email inbox is overloaded with invoices. They don't have an accounts payable system to be able to, regimentally pay their invoices. They've got to do bank transfers. It's quite, they're as busy and frantic as you. So you can do them, or I guess you can really help them out by picking up the phone and going, hey, I'm just here to help. Let's get this sorted.
Yeah, I've got to believe that 9 times out of 10 or more than that, they just forgot to pay or just didn't mean to not pay, or they thought they did pay. And I've got to believe that's the majority of the situations. I won't go into a long story, but Sam, I don't think it's in his book, but he's told me over and over again that the reason why they have no accounts receivable issue at Centertel, you might not know, it's an answering service. So they have hundreds and hundreds of clients, and they're on their call center. And I think they'll send a message at like 3 days, and then they'll call them at 4 days and leave a voicemail if they don't answer. And it basically says that if we don't have the money within, I think, 7 days of being late, you're cut off and you get no service. And so like nobody ever goes past 7 days. So it's like, he's like, we don't have any, he's like, we've never had anything past 7 days because then they're not our client anymore. Yeah. And it's like extreme, but it works. It works for that industry, and all the clients know, hey, if you're not going to pay in 7 days, you don't get to be a client anymore.
Yeah.
Really, really.
I think that's a great example. And I think that works well when you've got that amount of control, you can switch off the service. A lot of businesses where it's time and materials, you're a web designer, you're a builder. This is probably a key takeaway as well, is leave something back. Keep something on your side that you can hold out and not deliver until you've received that final payment. And it's quite possible to do. You just have to step back and think about it in terms of how you structure your invoices and the timing of your payments. In my web design business, we used to get payments. We'd always save the last 10%, to make sure we delivered most of the project, but we would never switch the website live until we got that final 10% paid. And we made that clear from the outset. The other thing you can do is put a stop work. So part of a good accounts receivable process for a service business, like we work with a lot of accountants. This might not happen till, say, 60 days past due. It depends on how much cash they're willing to lend their customer. But we'll have an automated email that goes out. Your account has now been placed on stop work. And it goes out as an automated email. One advantage of that is that you can then blame your system. So sometimes customers will go, you're treating me mean. We had this conversation and, we go way back and you shouldn't be so mean to me. And you go, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's just our accounts receivable system. It will send you these automated things. It looks like you have been placed on stop work. So you can still be the good guy, which is great. Blame the system, blame the automation, blame me if it's our software. And it gives you a great basis to have that conversation in a positive way.
Yeah, no, I think that coming up with the best way to do something and putting it into a system prevents the emotional aspect of, well, I know that client has this situation, or I know this client has, and then you have 50 different stories for 50 different clients, and it confuses what really is just good business practice. Well, that's great. So what would you say is or you give us a success story, if you could, a success story of a company that was not organized at all, and then they were. What was that like for the owner?
Yeah, sure. I guess a good one I can think of would be quite a large accounting firm that we were working with. And you might expect that accountants would be really onto it with their money, right? So, but these guys had several $100,000 that was more than 90 days overdue.
Mm.
And they generally they got paid eventually, but I think, the directors were saying, well, it'd be nice to have that, 400K in our bank. It's like, yeah, it kind of makes sense, right? So they came to us with that, and effectively we just worked through, this is the system that we want to follow moving forward. These are the reminders. These is the exact timings at which we'll do stop work. This is when we pick up the phone. So we designed this, what we call a workflow, and then we just started to run it. Now, when you deal with a big, large account like that, we actually started focusing on the plus 90 because customers, it could be a bit jarring, just to go, hey, we want all the money now. So we had to, over 3 months, start to change their expectations around, no, we do actually want to get paid. We do want to enforce our terms. So that can be a bit of a process. But yeah, it took us probably 90 days, 120 days. But we'd reduce that by 200K just by having good process, good customer service, and we brought all that back in. And nowadays, they sit close to 100, 120K past due, and we're still trying to refine that back just by tuning the system. But you start somewhere, you tune it as you go. And yeah, they're stoked. I mean, they've outsourced the calling process to us as well. So their practice manager, who's so busy, now that's just one thing completely off her plate. In fact, they repurposed a staff member into doing some other things in the business because we were just 10 times more efficient. So it's been a solid win.
Yeah, I think that's a great example of just people are actually what is it? So why do people get into that trap? Like how do they fall into that trap? Is it a trap they fall into over time, or they have enough cash and they just don't feel like it's worth it, or is it an emotional thing? Like what would you say is the reason why people slide into the situation?
A common one is sometimes people are just unaware. They're not watching that number, or it's in the back of their minds. They kind of know the overdue amount is creeping up, and maybe they're trusting a person in the business to manage that process, and they kind of believe that it's under control. And this was the case in this accounting firm. But in reality, the person was spending quite a lot of time each week, but was not getting results. You're kind of maybe banging her head against the same wall, doing the same thing, same process that wasn't actually working. And then I guess it just came to the point where someone asked the question. It's like, hang on, what we've put in place is not working. And this is quite common where the process is actually a person. And we see this, it's like, it's Bob in accounts, or it's Jan, the office admin who's supposed to do this in their spare time, but they're not quite keeping up with it. And, and here we are because it just, the process wasn't working.
Mm-hmm. No, that's great. I could share some horror stories of our own business over the last 10 years. And we switched from one person handling a system, and then we automated it. And then we moved to new technology and a new person, and it didn't transfer over. And then we're like, let's check on our accounts receivable. And it was like, wow, there's a lot of money that our system missed. And so it's really important to get into routine with that.
Yeah. I think what I find interesting is that many businesses come to us and they've got 50K, 100K, could be a lot more. Usually if they've not really had a system and you move to a system, usually within 60 days, 120 days max, we've got at least half of that money back in, and we just keep it at this new level. So it's really is night and day from not really having a process to having a process. So it's, yeah, I mean, I think it's a no-brainer, but that's that's why we're talking, I guess.
Yeah, no, it really is. So anyone who's listening to this and has not checked on their accounts receivable, past due, collections in a while, maybe this is a good time to do it, especially if you need some cash, right? It's always one of those things when I'm working with a client and looking for some money to help them over some rough spot or cash flow. It's always like, well, who owes you money? And it's usually a list, and that's easy money. You've already made the sales, you've already delivered the work, you just have to collect it. So it's pretty quick. Well, since we're running a little bit low on time here, why don't you tell us about a system in your business? I know you've gone through some, or your personal life. We like to ask all of our guests about a system that they particularly like, or that's given them some benefit or efficiency for their clients or themselves. So do you have a system you want to share with us?
Yeah. Well, I suppose I've been pretty passionate about this accounts receivable process, and it took me a while to think about or actually realize what we'd built. Um, and we've got some resources on our website that sort of go into this in a bit more detail. But effectively, we divided this into three parts. It's kind of a pyramid. If you imagine at the bottom, you've got your process, which is the workflow and the steps you follow. Above that, you've got your technology, which helps you to automate your process. And then on top, which is kind of the sharp end, is your person. Mm-hmm. And so we've kind of adopted this pyramid idea, and it's just helped people understand and actually review the way that they're working, or whether they actually even have an accounts receivable system in their business, or whether it really just relies on a person and they're just turning up and throwing hours at it each day. And so, yeah, I think that's probably what we've built. I didn't realize that's what we were building, when we started 5 years ago, but we've just been talking to customers, looking at the problem I've probably spent thousands of hours looking at, accounts receivable problems and thinking about it and going, well, how do we solve this and keep it solved so that people can go back to just doing what they love, which is, for me, it was building websites and talking to customers, solving their problems, and not worrying about the fact whether cash was coming in. So, yeah, I think it's been cool building it, but it's been quite a journey to actually get it to something that we've got, a high level of confidence in.
Yeah, well, I'm excited to watch your company grow, because this is definitely something that everyone needs if they don't have it already. And so it'll be fun to watch it go from here. So what's one thing that I didn't ask you, Matt, that I should have asked you during this interview?
How did I come up with the name Debtor Daddy?
Yes, let's hear that story.
Well, actually, I think my father was an English teacher, and somehow I grew up probably loving alliteration. Uh-huh. My web company was also alliteration. It was called Practice Plus, and it was, and for some reason I spent 2 weeks jotting ideas in a notebook, and just all kinds of combinations. And then one day I wrote down Debtor Daddy, and I just thought, yeah, that fits. My team have said I'm not naming any other companies. I'm not allowed to, which is probably fair. So.
Well, it worked for GoDaddy, right? GoDaddy seems to be doing just fine as a company.
Indeed, yeah. People either love it or they hate it, and if they love it, they can become a customer. If they don't, we don't.
Yeah, well, it's catchy. No, I like the name. I think it's smart. All right, so where can people go find Debtor Daddy if they want some help with their accounts receivable and they want some more cash in their hand?
Yeah, well, that's debtordaddy.com. And if you go to debtordaddy.com/guides, there's a whole lot of resources. There's a lot more content on the things I've been talking about today. Self-assessment forms. There's even a workflow design tool, so you can step through your process and actually start to design your ideal process. And yeah, my email is matt, M-A-T-T, @debtordaddy.com, so anyone can just reach out and ask me a question.
Cool. Well, very good. I'm going to have my team check it out, see how our system compares with yours, and get some ideas. It's great to do that. All right, Matt. Well, again, thanks for being on the podcast today. Your Saturday morning there, so I appreciate you doing that. And everyone else, thanks for joining us in the podcast, whether you're catching it on live stream on Facebook or iTunes or anywhere else you're watching this, YouTube. Leave us a review. And then once a week, we pull one of those reviews out and we mail a copy of that book right there behind me. So just take a screenshot of that other review, email it to info@workthesystem.com. And then once a week, we mail out a book, and hopefully you can be the lucky winner. And of course, if you want the free download of the book, you can go to workthesystem.com and get that as well. Otherwise, we'll see you all next week. Matt, thanks again. And we'll see you on Friday. Bye-bye.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.